We begin today with bracing warnings about Donald Trump's assault on constitutional limits and a sitting Supreme Court justice making a rare public statement about the impact on the judiciary. Without directly naming Trump, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson appeared to denounce the administration's repeated attacks on judges. As she put it to an audience of sitting federal judges and lawyers last night, Jackson said, quote, "The attacks are not random. They seem designed to intimidate those of us who serve in this critical capacity, and they ultimately risk undermining our Constitution and the rule of law." I can report that I was at that event last night, and the crowd was keenly focused on the justice's words. Jackson had been slated to give brief remarks before settling into a longer conversation with a sitting judge about her recent memoir. She wound up speaking for a little over a quarter of an hour about the attacks on the judiciary before pivoting to that conversation about her memoir. At the end of the evening, the crowd gave Jackson a standing ovation. On the same night that Justice Jackson made those comments, Donald Trump was in Alabama, and he had this to say.
The courts are trying to stop me from doing the job that I was elected to do. But they have to let us do the job that the voters want us to do. Judges are interfering, supposedly based on due process.
Meanwhile, this morning, Trump opened a new front on a different perceived enemy with a legally dubious threat to enlist the IRS in his crusade against Harvard University. Trump vowed he will be, quote, taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status. As the Times reports, quote, federal law prohibits the president from directing the IRS to conduct tax investigations. At this hour, it is unclear if the IRS will follow Trump's directive. Today, Harvard called that move, quote, unlawful. But let's step back and think about the bigger picture. This week, the New York Times reporting declared Donald Trump's, quote, assault on legal constraints as unlike anything the United States has experienced. And legal experts from across the ideological spectrum denounced the president's increasingly authoritarian tactics, including using the power of the presidency to attack perceived enemies. To discuss all of this, joining me now is Professor Deborah Archer, ACLU president and a law professor at New York University. Deborah is also the author of a brand new book, Dividing Lines: How Transportation Infrastructure Reinforces Racial Inequality. Also at the table with us is Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent with Vanity Fair and an MSNBC political contributor. Deborah, let's start off with Justice Jackson's remarks last night. How unusual is it to have a sitting member of the court speak so frankly about the state of the judiciary and the interaction between the administration and the judiciary?
It is unusual. We've seen it a couple of times recently with this administration. What I think she did was really important, to use her platform to speak to something that we've been seeing and documenting, and that is this administration taking steps to bring the legal system underneath the president's thumb. And that undermines the ability to hold him to account, to protect the rule of law. We're seeing him do that by challenging the integrity of folks on both sides of the bench. So he has challenged law firms who have brought cases that he doesn't agree with, nonprofits, and he has called out justices and judges by name.
So Deborah recently alluded to the idea that other judges have talked about this. Molly, we know that Chief Justice John Roberts issued a very brief statement a few weeks ago. This, I think, was a little bit more elaborate in terms of the statement. She referenced Alexander Hamilton's quote that if we lose an independent judiciary, then we've lost the Constitution. How important, Molly, was it for her to say this? And does it resonate more than the Chief Justice's very brief statement from a few weeks ago?
Well, I think all of what the Supreme Court is doing is resonating. And because we see this because Donald Trump talked about due process, right? And the due process decision was a 9-0. And I think that, right, there have been a couple decisions around this, but there was one that was actually, I think there were two that were 9-0. So that has clearly, he's sort of seen that. He understands that. And I think it's important to remember, he sees polling. He knows what's happening. He knows what he's doing is not popular. And I think the people who we've seen stand up, we've seen Jackson stand up, and we've also seen Harris, too. Both say that these are the guardrails. We need them. Yet again, we're seeing black women stand up, right, and say, what no one else is sort of brave enough to say, which is that we are at a very perilous moment in American democracy. And I think that is what she's saying. And she's saying it because she sees how perilous this is.
Right. So in addition to Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Chief Justice, and Kamala Harris, we also heard something from retired Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, who said, quote, "It's quite possible that high-ranking officials in the Trump administration, including Marco Rubio, Kristi Noem, and Pam Bondi, might be held in criminal contempt because of their refusal to comply with court orders on the deportation issue." Deborah, is this likely? What are the different constraints here in terms of having the courts hold the administration accountable through contempt proceedings?
There are lots of ways to hold the administrative accountable, and that is one of them. It's something that normally would be done by the Department of Justice, but under this administration, where the president has exercised complete control to direct the Department of Justice, it's unlikely that's going to happen. But a court could appoint an independent attorney to act in that role. But still, the president has powers that might allow him to get around that as well. He could pardon the members of his administration. But it is important to remember that there still are checks and balances on folks within his administration.
So Deborah raises a good point. This can obviously be checked by the administration in various ways. The DOJ can refuse to go forward with any efforts on criminal contempt proceedings. The president might be able to pardon someone who is criminally convicted of contempt. What about other kinds of constraints, whether it is the court of public opinion, maybe Congress gets off the couch at some point? Molly, what are the other avenues here to hold this administration accountable, especially in light of what we've seen over the last week in terms of the president's dismal polling numbers?
So what we historically thought was from Trump 1.0 was that in Trump's first administration, when he crashed the markets, which he did, there was a pushback and he was like, I don't want to lose my friend's money, right? He had this immediate sort of reaction. This time, he has not had the same kind of reaction. But with the bond markets, when he saw the bond markets were really freaking out, when he saw that he was enacting what's something that could end up being a dollar flight, which would make all of our debt more expensive and would change really the way we live in many meaningful ways. I think when he saw that, he understood it, and that was a guardrail. So I would say there are maybe three, right? The judiciary, the bond market, and what is left of the free press.
All right, so money talk seems to be a theme here. Molly, let's pivot to the story about Harvard. I want to run some tape from a debate that broke out last night actually today on CNBC. So take a listen.
Because maybe they can put enough leverage to get him to so many other universities voluntarily complied. Harvard's fighting.
Voluntarily? I mean, this is a shakedown.
Okay, whatever you want to call it.
Let's not say it's nothing has been voluntary. It's like the whole thing is a shakedown.
Could be ends justify the means.
The ends justify the means.
No, the
ends do not justify the means. It is impossible. At some level, you have to believe it. Democracy is about a process. It is.
Okay, Molly, that was Aaron Ross Sorkin saying democracy is about a process. In what way can we extrapolate this from Harvard? Is this really about a single university, or is there something larger here? Is Aaron Ross Sorkin right that democracy itself is on the line?
Oh, 100%. First of all, this administration is using anti-Semitism as a cloak, right? This is not about anti-Semitism. If they want to fight anti-Semitism, there are a lot of things they can do, and that would be great. And nobody wants anti-Semitism. It's bad. I'm Jewish. We don't like it. It's terrible. That said, that's not what this is about. And we all know this is about Harvard bending the knee. This is about Harvard becoming a captured institution the way Columbia has. And what Harvard has smartly realized is that the courts will protect them in a way that Trump won't. When you're a captured institution, the way Columbia is, you are at the mercy of Donald Trump. And we see this with the law firms that have given up. They are, Trump can change his mind at any time. In many ways, Harvard is better off because they have the law. And I think that's a really important point. And 100%, this is not about anti-Semitism. This is about capturing institutions. It's about making sure that they don't express, do the science, do the things that Donald Trump doesn't like.
What's your take on this, Deborah, as someone within a university, the threat to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status? Why Harvard? Why this moment?
I agree with what Molly has said. This is about democracy. It is about an attack on all of the institutions that form a free society. It is because he disagrees with things that Harvard's teaching.
These are engines of dissent, and he's trying to shut them down.
And trying to shut them down, trying to shut down education that he doesn't agree with, that he may find distasteful. And it violates the First Amendment. Harvard has First Amendment rights. The students there have First Amendment rights, and it's a violation of those rights.
So, Molly, the Supreme Court rebukes are rare. The stronger resistance from the university may be rarer still. What do you see going forward? Are more people going to stand up to this administration?
Yes. I think they absolutely are. And I think Harvard, it was so important that they did it, and the way they did it was perfect. And, you know, they were advised by Stephen Levitsky, who is an expert in authoritarianism. I mean, they just did this exactly right. And we've seen other universities join them. We've seen Michael Roth from Wesleyan, who has been just a leader at this. And look, this is a moment when we have to be brave. But the good news is the law is on our side, and the public polling is on our side, right? You know, there were polls last week. Donald Trump, the word that people used was chaotic, and that he had taken too much power.